Do you think it's possible that the West will at some point grant these security guarantees to Russia in some future peace agreement in terms of not having any more NATO expansion?
The basic terms of a peace agreement have always been obvious. It's basically what was formulated in the Minsk II agreements, the Normandy initiatives by France and Germany. It's kind of interesting that Merkel and Hollande are now claiming that this was a fraud, that they never intended it, that they were just giving time to Ukraine to rearm. That's not credible. They're almost certainly lying. There is no evidence in the documentary or historical record to show that they were not taking it seriously. I think both of them are now trying to cover up and not be accused of being Putin lovers, the ultimate crime in the West. But the fact is that the Minsk proposals are pretty much along the lines of what you suggested. Ukraine should be neutralized, should have a status like Mexico or like Austria during the Cold War, no infringement on sovereignty, but neutralized. And with regard to the Donbass region, the Minsk proposals were that they should be incorporated within Ukraine, but given substantial autonomy. Now, whether that's still a question of Crimea is off the discussion for the moment. Actually, as recently as last March, Zelensky made similar proposals. It's not unimaginable. I mean, now they reject it, but that's recent. As the war escalates, positions harden naturally. That's part of the natural dynamic. But is it possible to move towards something like that? Yes. There will have to be security guarantees for Ukraine. Now, that can be given out. I mean, first of all, I don't even think they're necessary, but if you think they're necessary, they can be given. The West can make strong commitments to protect Ukraine against any future Russian aggression if it is neutralized. And there's no reason to expect any Russian aggression after that. You have to take a look at Western propaganda on this issue here, too. It's quite interesting to take a look at Sweden and Finland, which is an interesting case, now applied for membership in NATO. There's a concept that George Orwell defined. He called it doublethink. It's the ability to have two ideas in mind which are completely contradictory and to believe both of them. He thought it was a property of totalitarian states. He was wrong. Standard in the West. Sweden, Finland, and most of the West are perfect examples of this. On the one hand, they're gloating over the demonstration of Russian military incompetence. They weren't even able to conquer towns 20 kilometers from the border, defended by a mostly citizens' army. It shows that our belief that they had a strong military was completely wrong. It's corrupt, and they don't know what they're doing, and so on. It's wonderful. Look how weak they are. That's one idea. The other idea is they're about to conquer the West. We're just on the verge of destruction from the Russian monster, which is about to conquer everything. Well, that's Sweden and Finland. Swedish, I mean, I've had talks in Sweden and Finland. Strategic analysts and other people with their brains functioning know that there isn't the slightest threat, remotest threat from Russia to either Sweden or Finland, not even remote. It's never been hinted at, and there's no capability of it. But they also know something else. Sweden and Finland have already been pretty much integrated into NATO, not formally, but in practice, joint military operations and so on. If they join NATO, it's a wonderful opportunity for the quite advanced military systems of Sweden and Finland. They'll have new markets, they'll have interoperability of technology, great for their military industry. So let's join NATO on the pretense that Peter the Great is coming to destroy us. This is pretty effective propaganda. And in fact, a lot of the population probably believes it. It's kind of interesting to notice that how desperate Western propaganda is to find some indication of Russian intentions to do what they are totally incapable of doing. So if Putin makes a speech in which he mentions Peter the Great, a whole bunch of columns immediately appear. Look, he's saying he wants to conquer the West. We've got to have a bigger military. I mean, actually, France and Germany outspend Russia in military expenditures, let alone the United States and Britain. But this goes way back. You can go back to the early days of the Cold War, when 1950, 51, when the United States was concocting some image of what they call the Kremlin slave state, which is by its very nature inherent, has to extend its domination over the entire world. It's part of its intrinsic nature. There's nothing you can do about it. So we have to have a huge military to overcome it. When Stalin offered in 1952 to allow a unified Germany with one condition, not join a hostile military alliance, it was supported by people like George Kennan, but the mainstream just silenced it, denounced it, ridiculed it. We don't want this. We want the Kremlin conspiracy to conquer the world. That way we can build up a huge rearmament program, stimulate our economies, overcome the so-called dollar gap, the inability of Europe to purchase U.S. Exports. That's what lies behind it. But we have to have this Russian demon conquering the world. Now it's a Chinese demon. We have to surround China with military bases, encircle them, go to war to prevent China from developing economically, because otherwise they're going to conquer us. I mean, it just goes. You can carry it back to the Declaration of Independence if you like. Read the Declaration of Independence. One of the condemnations of King George III, I'm quoting, he unleashed against us the merciless Indian savages. Is that what happened? It was the merciless English savages who were attacking the native population. But no, we were innocent, just living in peace, and suddenly these merciless Indian savages attacked us on the command of George III. Everyone intones that piously every July 4th. It's only 250 years, you know. And we're breaking no new ground. Britain was exactly the same. France was exactly the same when they were the dominant imperial powers. All imperial powers are angelic, under attack by barbarians. That's just standard fare. US just picking it up from the standard imperial history.